Hello everyone, I'm George from Ireland, and here I am in front of the Embassy of Afghanistan to the Court of St James, as in London, United Kingdom. And where could be more apposite to talk about what's just happened in Afghanistan today, the fall of Kabul. Almost 20 years after it was taken by NATO and the Northern Alliance. Well, wouldn't it be more apposite to speak about that in Kabul? Not on your Nelly, it's not worth my life. You wouldn't catch me going there. Anyway, not for all the cocaine in Colombia, or indeed the heroin in Herat. So yeah, here it is. Well, what a fine Victorian building in South Kensington. Now, significantly, no flag is fluttering the breeze from their flagpole. If you look here, the Tunisian embassy, they've got their national banner up. The Thais are displaying their national colours, but Afghanistan is not. So is that because they packed up shop already? I suspect not. So it's been staggering because the United Nations Security Council, they authorised ISAF, the International Security for Afghanistan Force, and the United States was involved. The United States, it invoked that article of the NATO Charter saying that all the other NATO member states had to help it, the only time that's ever been done. So there now, I think it's 26 countries in NATO. There weren't that many back in 2001. But they all sent troops, some non-NATO troops, some non-NATO countries such as Ukraine and Azerbaijan. They dispatched troops to assist there. So that was going on for 20 years. And there's over 4,000 American troops were killed, a few thousand other NATO troops, obviously tens of thousands of Afghans. You know, the Taliban were driven back, but they've largely come back. And so the Trump administration was negotiating with the Taliban in Doha, Qatar, and they said, no, we'll be reasonable when you pull out, and we'll negotiate, and we're going to enter the democratic process. But then Joseph Robinette Biden Jr., when he was sworn as president the 20th of January this year, he reaffirmed his intention was to continue with Donald Trump's policy, one of the few things that they saw eye to eye on, and withdraw. Now, Trump had only spoken about withdrawing. Biden's actually achieved that, well, almost. The final date for withdrawal was supposed to be, ironically enough, the 11th of September this year. That's right, 9/11. The 20th anniversary of the World Trade Tower attacks. So the US military pullout is not even complete, and already the Taliban has taken Kabul, the capital city. So provincial capital has been falling like 9 pins over the past few weeks, and many Afghan soldiers have seen the writing on the wall. They fled. They went to the northern border because, of course, the anti-Taliban forces are stronger in the northern section of the country, which is why the anti-Taliban coalition in the 90s was known as the Northern Alliance. We call it that. They actually call themselves the United Islamic Front. But anyway, going to Uzbekistan and Tajikistan, which have let them in. Remember, something like 27% of Afghanis are ethnic Tajiks, the same people as in Tajikistan, speaking that Tajik language, which is related to Persian, the language of Iran. And some others are ethnically Uzbeks. So the Uzbeks and the Tajiks have let them in. These are both very poor countries. But the Turkmens have not. Turkmenistan won't let them in, partly because they just don't give a care about anyone else. They just don't give a damn. There's an extremely cruel and exploitative dictatorship there, which make the Taliban seem not so bad by comparison, some people think. Anyway, so partly that's also going to force the Afghan army to stand and fight, although that hasn't quite panned out. And so even President Ashraf Ghani, this is almost a month before the US is due to withdraw, President Ghani fled yesterday. He got on a plane and flew to I don't know where. I would guess India might be a good guess. The Pakistanis are, of course, the allies of the Taliban. And China is an ally of Pakistan, so they can't go to either of those countries. Now, Iran might take him in because the Iranians are concerned about the Hazara minority, who are Shia, perhaps 10% of the Afghan populace, and the Iranians are 90% Shia. So the Iranians got a headache there that the Taliban, their hereditary foes, taken over again. There has been conflict in Afghanistan for 43 years at least. Now, obviously, it's chopped and changed. There have been shifting alliances. It's not always the same issue, and the factions have gone back and forth, and people have declared neutrality and left the country, and people have double-crossed each other. So it's an incredibly complex country, a patchwork of tribal fiefdoms and a smorgasbord of ethno-linguistic groups. But over 99% of the population are Muslims, most of those Sunni Muslims, as I said. So now, will the United Kingdom soon enough recognise the Taliban as the legitimate government of Afghanistan. The UK and almost no other country did that in the 90s, despite the Taliban controlling about 90% of the landmass of Afghanistan. They had the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, their constitution being the Quran. At the moment, it's the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan. So we shall see what's going to happen. I mean, I think they won't go all the way back to the Middle Ages, the Taliban. You know, times have changed. They've moved on. Saudi Arabia, one of their big sponsors, one of the few countries that recognize them as a legitimate government in the 90s, they've moved forward as well. So they've liberalized a little bit. So now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that they're going to be winning any rewards for human rights, the Taliban, or women's liberation or something, but I don't think they'll be quite as savage as last time. Perhaps I delude myself. That might be wishful thinking on my part. So has nothing been accomplished? I don't think so. Something was accomplished at least for a while. You would like to leave behind some sort of permanent legacy. That was nation building was about. Obviously, George W. Bush used to poo-poo the very idea of nation building, and then 9/11 came along and he performed a volte-face. Well, a road to Damascus experience, you might say, as a born-again Christian. The scales fell from his eyes in his Damascene conversion, but it didn't pan out. Why? I suppose there wasn't proper commitment. People weren't willing to pay taxes, lower living standards. We weren't willing to suffer a high enough death toll in order to achieve that. Weren't willing to threaten Pakistan. Remember, the United States was subsidizing the Pakistani military through almost all this time. One of the few decisions that Trump made, which merits some praise, is his cutting military aid to Pakistan. Why on earth are we helping these people who we know are in bed with the Taliban? Inter-services intelligence. That's Pakistan's secret service. They helped to form the Taliban, provide them with intelligence, weaponry, funding, and all the rest of it. I mean, to this day, toned it down a bit after 9/11, never completely lost contact. And the Taliban is actually not very united. It's quite fissile. So their command of the faithful, he can't really control them even if he wants to. So that's it. We've got to get used to the Taliban being there. Was it a huge waste of blood and treasure? Arguably. And again, how curious it is that so much should be spent fighting in one of the poorest nations on earth, a country almost bereft of natural resources, and heroin is its only significant export earner. I know they're carpets, but come on, I think we know which earns more. So I'm not saying that all Afghans are bad at all. I do feel very sorry for them. Very glad not to be living there right now. And I know some people who spent years there. So many countries are willing to take Afghan refugees. But how do we tell the sheep from the goats? How do we know they're not Taliban operatives who just shave their beard off and pose as a secularist? Well, we shall see. If NATO hadn't intervened after 9/11, do you think that would have been the last Al-Qaeda attack? I don't think so. That would have been just the beginning. There would have been more and more. Now, there were a few more as it was, but the thing is not to make it easy for them, to have a safe haven for them to be training and plotting, so to sort of drain the swamp. Semi-successful. Now, the Taliban may have learnt its lesson. It paid a very heavy price for allowing Al-Qaeda to use it as a jumping off point for these attacks in the United States. So they might say, well, don't rock the boat, live and let live. We won't poke our nose into your affairs if you don't poke your nose into ours. And that's the deal that Turkmenistan and others are offering them. The Chinese, the Russians, then they'll probably take it because they know they'll be heavily bombed if they don't. Not overthrown, not a ground invasion, but it's better not to suffer. Because otherwise, in a sense, they've won, they've got Afghanistan, and so long as they keep their snout clean, they're not going to suffer too much. That's enough from me, so please follow me on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, and donate to me on PayPal. I'm georgecallahan79@gmail.com. Toodaloo.